All right, everyone. So on Empire, you obviously know that we talk a lot about the institutions coming into crypto. And that is why we are super excited to share that we are hosting the Digital Asset Summit. We've hosted this since 2019. It's coming up in London, March 18th to 20th. Don't miss your chance to get ahead of the curve. You can get 20% off with code EMPIRE20. We'll see you in London.
So welcome everyone. This is going to be a very special episode. This might be my first live episode that we've done. So I'm joined by Robbie from Immutable. We've known each other for a bit of time and had the good fortune of investing early on. So Robbie, welcome.
Thanks, Santiago. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's actually my first time in Sydney, and Robbie's been a great host. He showed me around a bit. And as you can tell, it's pure summertime and beautiful out here. So.
It's roughly 30 degrees Celsius. I won't do the Fahrenheit conversion, but it is probably the best time to come visit Sydney. So
yeah, highly recommended. So Robbie, why don't we start with your background and a little bit of context on Immutable?
Absolutely. So bit of background around me. I've been a software engineer for the last 10 years now. Originally taught myself how to code just after high school. And I've built roughly, 4 or 5 startups before Immutable. Was a massive gamer growing up. And so the first thing that I built with my brother was a League of Legends betting platform. Right. Where you could wager on your own matches until that was shut down by Riot Games for breaching their terms of service. And the second thing we built was a Shopify competitor, which basically automatically optimize your store based on machine learning. So it optimized your pricing and your copy to have the best possible conversion. And that went reasonably well. But we got into Bitcoin in 2014.
That's pretty early.
Yeah, pretty early on. Yeah. I think we were just investors. We weren't super into the technology. I wasn't super sold. But when Ethereum came out, my buddy got me into it, who bought a percent of the pre-sale, and we just became completely obsessed with essentially what you could build. And that was the big difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum to us, is I could see the potential to basically replace hundreds of billions of dollars of financial infrastructure overnight. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that initially sold me was do you remember Ethereum?
Yeah. Wow, different times.
Different time. But the magic about Ethereum for me was they launched this product, which is basically a probabilistic dice game, smart contract in Ethereum, little gambling application. And I remembered in Australia, which is one of the largest per capita gambling countries in the world. I'm not particularly into gambling. It is, I think it might be the largest. Wow. Yeah, it's kind of sad in some ways. But I remember the Australian government, in order to ensure that slot machines pay out the required payout amount, they air gap all the machines and then they heuristically test them. So they literally go out of these machines. They're spending them hundreds of times and making sure that they're paying out what they're saying they're paying out. And they're cut off from the internet to prevent any irregular updates. And they spend billions of dollars of this every year. And then someone built a little application with a few hundred lines of smart contract code that rendered all of that redundant. You had open and transparent probabilities that couldn't be routed around, that were completely guaranteed by the blockchain. And then they did something that the government could never do, which is they took the royalty or revenue streams from the protocol and they gave it to every person who used the machine. So essentially, democratized ownership of the company. Now, it wasn't the gambling that attracted me. It was, well, hey, if you can build what is essentially a toy in a few months that replaces or obviates billions of dollars of government spending, this is clearly the most powerful financial technology ever invented. This is going to take over the world. Mm-hmm. And I was also sold by this idea of the decentralized Uber back in the day. If you remember, that was one of the big pitches along with the Ethereum white paper. Riders put on the network, fees would compress. We haven't seen that happen, obviously, to physical networks yet. I still believe it will, but we have seen that happen to financial and on-chain networks. Right. Things like DEXs, which have incredibly compressed fees and where they're typically democratically owned. Things like Immutable, where we can give every trader ownership of the underlying protocol. So that's what sold me. Me and my brother started building trading bots for the first few years, first on Ethereum, on Poloniex, and then on decentralized exchanges.
You were on the troll bots.
I did not participate, but yes,
it's legendary.
It was a lot of fun until I think they removed that in 2017.
Once it got acquired, I think they were, or before it got acquired, I think they removed it. Yeah.
And that one was a very funny experience. I remember using leverage for the first time, and I vowed to never naked short Ethereum again. And we basically wanted to build a business that would long term be scalable, though, and actually have an impact on the industry. And so in 2017, it's the start of the year, and we were writing the white paper for the distributed autonomous bank. I was at university at the same time, studying law and computer science. And my brother was the lead engineer at a billion-dollar e-commerce store down under here. And we basically, we'd finished writing the white paper in the early smart contracts for something called the Distributed Autonomous Bank, or DApp. It was effectively a lending protocol, very similar to Compound. We hadn't solved all the over-collateralization problems. I don't think they've been solved today either. But we were about to launch this when 5 ICOs went to 20, went to 40. And we just got very cold feet about the space from a regulatory perspective. We thought everyone was going to jail. And we only had interest in building something that would be around for the long term. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the first ever NFT came out in the form of a CryptoPunk. And we saw this and we said, this will be how gamers own in-game items. And that to us was just so blindingly obvious. Back then, gamers spent $80 billion US on in-game items every year. Now it's 150. And so we started by building the first ever decentralized blockchain game. It was called Etherbots, came out in December 17. It went viral, it made a few $1 million in sales, and Coinbase put their first ever venture check in Immutable. And we started building kind of, what we are today. And obviously over the last 6 years, we've now scaled it to 300 people around the world. We've raised 300 million US from Tencent and more. Most that's in the bank. We've, obviously worked with IMX, the token, which is worth, roughly 2.5, $3 billion US today. And we have 70% of all Web3 games in the world building on us. So, it's been a long journey, but I think the persistence has been the most important thing, because ultimately the amount of people we've seen just come and go based on them either misspending money, having the wrong approach to security. It's almost funny how well you will do in the space just by being incredibly consistent and focused on your mission and making smart, sane, secure decisions focused on actually delivering value.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I met you and we made the investment, Axie was picking up, and I think people were, the play to earn narrative was really hot at the time. Now it's completely died down, and gaming as a narrative, you could argue, is not very popular. I think you're one of the few people in crypto that has a very unique vantage point to understand who is building and what is the reason to build a game on chain. So maybe you can unpack that for people and give us your what is the type of gaming, what are the games that you're excited about?
Yeah.
How does it work with Immutable? And yeah.
Totally. So I think on-chain games would only represent around 15% of the games building on Immutable today. And by on-chain, I mean the majority of the logic of the game's gameplay, state-to-state transitions would be tried to be stored on actual on-chain blockchain code. And I think that's probably because the 80-20, the vast majority of value is from taking the actual asset economies and tokenizing them. And that's what we see as the majority. You might call it Web 2.5. You could also call it fully Web 3. In my opinion, something like Illuvium, where 100% of proceeds go back to ILV, the token. I mean, that's basically as decentralized a valuation as you can have. But ultimately what they're doing is a sane mix of, they're building a very high fidelity traditional game. Right. An auto battler, and a collectible sort of RPG game like Pokemon. The idea is you take the assets, anything to do with the value of those assets, and you put that on chain. So randomness, merging, fusing, etc. of collectibles. And I think that's probably where we're going to have the biggest product market fit in the medium term. Mm-hmm. There are absolutely some really exciting fully on-chain projects. They're very ambitious. I think the jury is out as what will the user experience be of those games in the short term? And will there even be the sort of possibility of truly decentralizing in-game logic for a massively multiplayer game with 30 state updates per second?
And the challenge you're talking about there is it really is the computational intensity of a game. If every state transition, every interaction.
Precisely. Yeah.
And a game and I've heard Kieran from Illuvium talk about, it's sort of think about a Web 2 game, feature parity. The gamer might not even can play the game without having to set up a wallet, without ever thinking about crypto. Now it's on the Epic Store kind of marketplace, or in the store. And so you can go download the game, play it. And then it has, I've heard him say this concept of crypto enhanced. So it's if you want to claim the points, if you want to trade the NFTs that are there for you, then you can do that in a decentralized context. And And it solves a lot of the issues like so many people that are in gaming get interested in crypto, right?
Precisely. So to me, the most obvious product market fit is Counter-Strike Go has a secondary marketplace for the in-game skins or costumes. And they trade roughly $12 billion worth of those a year.
Wow.
That's on a database marketplace where they don't permit many third-party marketplaces. They certainly don't permit DeFi or other finance utility or value being placed upon it. And they regularly do things like trade lock it. So, hey, you can only trade them once per week and like ruin the value of gamers' assets. That to me is, well, let's just give them the ability to truly own and sell that stuff. That's the 100x value proposition. That's where we have an immediate need from an existing demand analog, which is why we were so excited in the first place. Absolutely. I think there's exciting future potential around decentralizing more on-game logic, but I don't think we need to look beyond, let's just take that $150 billion spent every year and actually give people property rights to it, give them an incentive-aligned business model where they can make money, say, through secondary royalties. And that to me is probably the second most important thing is by leveraging Web3, you're creating economic incentives that can be way more aligned between the publisher and the player. A good example is Magic the Gathering, where they can basically, there's an estimated secondary market cap of MTG cards, physical cards, of roughly 10 to $20 billion. But every year, Magic is forced to create new cards that are more powerful than any previous ones, sell a few tens of millions of dollars worth of them in order to generate revenue. And that makes the experience worse for everyone because you have power creep, you have devaluation of old cards, you have new sets being deprecating, old sets. Why not just take a clip on these asset trades and activity? Your incentive is just grow the GMV, grow the marketplace, grow the economy. That's the exact same incentive as the players have. That to me is a really exciting business model. One that it doesn't even matter about like what is the technical level of scarcity enforced on this stuff, because it's at the end of the day, the publisher has the same incentive as what the player is. And that's really what I think Web3 is about under its hood, is like realigning incentives of capitalism to be more democratic, more self-custodial, more ownable by everyone. Yeah.
So what's interesting, of course, like Immutable, you've been doing it for 6 years. And you quickly realize we can't do this on the L1 of Ethereum. We have to build an L2.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to get a perspective on that journey of 6 years, because now we have hundreds of L2s.
Yeah.
But I think you've been very focused and opinionated. Like, we want to own the gaming category. What makes Illuvium well suited for gaming? And
That's a great question. So first off, I would say the scaling journey for us was a hard fought one. I mean, we launched Squats Unchained in the middle of 2018. It immediately had more than 30 million NFTs as cards. So this is more than every other NFT on Ethereum L1 put together. And this is all launched without a scaling solution because they didn't exist. Yeah. And so we immediately had to invent batch minting and deferred minting, which is one, you could basically have your provable seed of on-chain randomness for, say, minting your cards. But then you could delegate when you wanted to mint those into actual NFT assets at any point in time later, which meant, like, let's say, because I think when we launched, do you remember Fcoin? It was a centralized exchange that launched, and it had an incentivized gas consumption of L1. And so we quite possibly chose the worst week in the history of gas congestion of Ethereum, like to date, to launch Scotch Unchained. I think Gwei was above 100, right, for context. So suddenly the packs that we were selling for $5, where the previous gas fee was 10 cents, now had a $10 fee.
Yeah.
So you're asking people to pay a $10 gas fee for a $5 pack of cards. It's not going to work.
Welcome to crypto.
welcome to crypto. Good luck building your business. And so we literally, we did two things. One, we invented deferred minting, where you could say very cheaply, not create all of your NFT assets, but just the on-chain randomness seed. And then when Gwei was 3, you could like mint it on-chain. And that was a big thing because it, effectively similar to, do you remember when you could like buy gas when it was cheap? Yeah. So like this was this proposition, but like made very simple for gamers. The second thing was, or as simple as it could be back then. The second thing was batch minting, which was a way of optimizing gas efficiency for NFTs by like 90%. And that's a standard still used by every major marketplace in the world today, which was invented by Alex, my co-founder. And we realized that even with all of this innovation architecture, it was still nuts. Like, you're still, at any point, you're requiring gamers to even pay a cent. It's too much friction. And there is no way you'll hit 1 billion gamers. So we started looking down the path of scaling solutions. And we basically investigated everything under the sun. We had a look at side chains, and we decided they never were suitable for our security profile, because the number one thing we would never do, we would never put users' assets at risk. The company reasons, you put your company at existential risk. If you have one failure, you will never regain the trust of players, nor the largest companies in the world. They will never build on you. But two, because we truly believed in the value of decentralized technology and like what we're building. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah. Let's just build a steam competitor, right? Yeah. Then we looked at Plasma, and nothing happened there, right? And then we looked at optimistic proofs and this whole branch of roll-ups, and I think that was, for us, didn't work for NFTs because of the withdrawal times and also because of the cost structure. Right. And we thought ZK was probably the long-term strictly superior solution. This is back in 2020, so pretty early when we were making this call. I still remember the conversation with the board, and they're like, this is a science experiment. Are you sure you want to bet the company it? And we're like, we're pretty sure this CK thing's going to work, guys. Like, hear us out. And we ended up building, essentially the first ever in production CK rollup for NFTs with the Starkware team with StarkX. And we released that in the end of 2020/21.
Yeah.
And obviously now we're launching Immutable CK VM, full smart contract compatibility, etc.
Is that with Polygon?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it was a long scaling journey. I think we had state channel experiment in there for like 4 months as a prototype as well. So
you've literally tried the entire flavor of you basically just described the Ethereum's like scalability journey.
Yes.
Because you were seeing.
Oh, and I didn't even mention the most important thing, which is, well, why not build an alt L1? Because it would have been very easy to build an alt L1 to raise back then we'd raised 15 mil. We could have raised 50 and pitched to a VC, we're building a new chain for X, right? And that was the most attractive thing you could do for venture. But we thought that we wanted to build where everyone wanted to build. And we also wanted to build with true decentralization and security. And on either of those, we just couldn't see a way where you're building outside of Ethereum's ecosystem or not scaling Ethereum's ecosystem. For us, scalability on top of Ethereum was far more attractive because you can inherit all of Ethereum's network effects and liquidity. Sure. And you also get the security of, what I think is by far the most decentralized and secure blockchain in the world. So that was a decision we made pretty early on, which was, hey, if there was, it's not some random form of maximalism. If there was another blockchain that was in the requirements for us, but there just wasn't and hasn't been up to date.
I want to get into ZK EVM. It just like zero knowledge proofs as a category and unpack that a little bit. But I want to ask you the question, but you read my mind, is if you were to do it today from scratch, we have other L1s. Would you consider something else?
I think we made the right call with Ethereum. And I'm happy with.
But would you do it today?
For sure. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
You kind of have the same setup, an L2.
Yeah. If I were going out the door and coming back in and saying, how do we build Immutable from scratch? Absolutely. It's ZK EVM on Ethereum, I think and I think the gaming market has largely shifted to want to build around an Ethereum ecosystem. I think because remember the difference, and this is better than I do, but every single bull run, you have this chain rotation thesis, right? Where the Chainlink God article, which I'm a big fan of, which basically says, you get congestion, you get high prices, you create narrative fodder to create alt L1s with reduced decentralization, improved scalability, and then you back those with hundreds of millions of dollars in order to bootstrap liquidity from scratch. That's what we see every single cycle. The difference about this cycle is L2's work and L3's work on Ethereum. So now the narrative can be you can scale this thing sort of horizontally rather than having to create brand new L1 architecture. And so I think that's the fundamental technical difference between, what's going to be the next bull run, whether it's in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and the historic ones we've had.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about the choice to do ZK, like zero knowledge proofs, because for anyone that comes to crypto, this is like the holy grail.
Yeah.
Right. And but it's taken a while, like a lot of good things. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I think if you're just looking down the decision pathways, it's, do you want to build on Ethereum or off Ethereum? And we made that choice pretty early on. We want to build an Ethereum aligned ecosystem. Then the choice was, what scaling infrastructure can you use? And apart from side chains, there wasn't really much that was viable apart from rollups. And that was even speculative back then, right? Obviously, sidechains were
This was 2020, 2019.
even when we're looking at like sidechains as an option, that's 2019.
Yeah.
It's end of 2018. The only other alternative is some sort of centralized solution built on top of Ethereum, like with Ethereum assets, but the custodial. And we were never really happy with custodial by default.
No.
And I think centralized solutions or centralized exchanges as backings for NFTs have clearly proven to not work, right?
Yeah.
So that was, I think, the right call as well. Then you get to the roll-up landscape, and you basically have to choose between optimistic roll-ups or ZK roll-ups. I think OIUs are generally fine, but for NFTs, they just in particular don't work well. And that's withdrawal times obviously much longer because you have to wait for force to be proven.
If you're working with optimism, or this is 4 or 5.
But this is before optimism even existed, right? Like this is like,
but as an architecture, it just takes a couple days.
Exactly.
You could have like incentivized like rally, like relayers to prove that, but it's still a lot.
Precisely. And the benefit, like if you have fundable tokens, you can market make. You can say, okay, well, I'm willing to take risk as the bridge and like kind of loan you on the other side. I can't loan you your one of a kind NFT, right? So it's by definition really, really hard to do for NFTs as a use case. Then it comes to what do you use in ZK. And I think there was probably only one even close to production team back then, which was Starkware, which built, we built our first app specific roll up. So it was a Validium implementation. It didn't have any smart contracts, but I think what it did do was it gave us scale, it gave us security, and it got us to market. And the really important thing in that is we wanted to use something which directly inherited Ethereum security. I think that was crucial to us. And we also knew we had to be able to support the scale of hundreds of millions of NFTs. I mean, like, let's be real. If this takes off, you have 3 billion gamers. They're each going to own thousands of assets. We have to support the scale of trillions of NFTs being traded many millions and millions of times per hour. So I think that was why we ended up on ZK, and we've been able to stick to that pathway, obviously expanding. We now have both Immutable X built across StarkX, app-specific rollup, no smart contracts, and we're about to launch Immutable ZK VM. And with the launch of Immutable ZK VM, we're also going to be able to launch our app chain hypothesis, offering, which is basically cross rollup liquidity and a large platform or large game can have their own immutable app chain with global order book, and that's what I'm really excited about is sort of horizontal scaling.
Again, you read my mind because I wanted to get your perspective on DYDX because I believe Diversify, you guys and DYDX were probably the first projects to use Starkware.
Yeah.
And then DYDX made the choice to go to Cosmos and have their own chain.
Yeah.
And, I've heard folks say, look, building on Cairo was difficult. You have to use basically they're the systems and like they would have to build it for you. Now the tooling is improved and,
I won't speak on Claro specifically, and big fan of the Starkware team. I think they're exceptional people. The main thing that's shifted, even since we made our initial decision, is EVM compatibility rather than EVM transpilability. And typically, we've actually always been. I think anytime a competitor says we're launching a proprietary language, like Cadence or some sort of like proprietary scripting for their smart contracts, it's a massive impediment actually to adoption. And they're always advertising it as this is a great way to use our blockchain. It's not. It's just you have to learn a new language. Right. And all of the network effects, people hypothesized back in the day, network effects would accrue to DeFi. It doesn't. DeFi can be cloned for the cost of $30 million in grant incentives as long as you use Solidity, because then you can just copy paste Ethereum. And that's ridiculously easy to do, as we've seen. So I think there has been massive network effects built around Solidity. You can even see even slight differences mean there's brand new forms of security and risk architecture, which means all of the benefits you get from smart contracts being audited is lost. So I think that those network effects will persist. And that's why we really value true EVM compatibility over like even a slight loss of composability.
Yeah. How important do you think security, decentralization is for the gamer? I mean, do you think that that's relevant at all? I mean, I appreciate from your standpoint, absolutely. But it's one of those things where how do you envision it's always a spectrum of security. Like DeFi requires way more security, you could argue, than a game.
Totally agree. Gamers should not have to care about this, but it's incredibly important. In the same way that if you used non-secure end-to-end encryption websites, users would not notice. Users shouldn't have to know the security algorithm that encrypts HTTPS, but it's absolutely fundamental to their information and data. If you're using the wrong thing, you're damaging users, there's going to be breaches of data, breaches of privacy that impact them. But it's something that they shouldn't ever notice. So it's a funny thing where you can kind of get away with it for a period of time. Your consumers aren't necessarily going to immediately notice, but as soon as you have one incident, you then lose the ability to have any future customers adopt you.
That technical debt sort of creeps up on you.
Precisely. So like, I think, and also the value of NFTs is not going to be trivial in gaming. Like there's already probably $1 trillion worth of digital assets that are just locked up in gaming, right? 150 billion every year. There's already literally provably tens of billions of dollars of Counter-Strike Go skins. So you add on DeFi, you add on financial utility, it probably gets 10 times larger. You have index funds, you have Goldman Sachs trading this stuff. So it's going to be very meaningful. I think it needs to be secure. Our approach has always been self-custody first, make the invisible user experience, but we never wanted to have like custodial wallets as a default.
Yeah. I want to transition a little bit into talking about the current state of gaming in crypto.
Yeah.
You obviously mentioned you have the lion's share. What is it? 76% of all games. Is there a game today that you would play that leverages crypto as kind of like you would dub a crypto game?
For sure. There's actually one on my phone that we just won it's not public yet, but I'm really excited about it. It's already got hundreds of thousands of players in Web 2 while they're testing. Okay. We just won this one yesterday. I'm really excited. Totally. I mean, like play Illuvium Auto Battler, play Cross the Ages, play Guild of Guardians if people remember the beta with day one retention of 67%. I mean, there's games coming out, and the universal thing about our catalog is we rank every game in the market map of all Web3 games. And our criterion is, what's the team quality? Okay, have they previously shipped successful games with millions of customers? That's actually a number one criterion. Yeah. Second, what's the economics and approach to Web3 game design? Third, what's the funding? How much firepower do they have behind to make this successful? Fourth, what's their sort of regular gameplay quality? What's the quality of the game they've built so far? And then fifth, what's their time to market? Obviously, that matters the most to us. We want to have hits faster. Right. But what that produces is games that we're playtesting. We're looking at, will ordinary people love these games? And that's how we prioritize where our go-to-market efforts go. And this is why I always say, when we have 220 well-funded games, these are the ones that we've proactively decided these are the ones that can be potential hits. And we've playtested the games, and our internal team's pretty brutal. They're like, hey, this is not a great game. But the reason that's so important is I'm not that interested in just having the next iteration of DeFi thinly skinned as a game in order to generate narrative legitimacy. We keep going through the same cycles in crypto, right? Like it's, I'm really not speaking to anything in particular here, but we often go through, someone recreates some sort of Ponzi and they just try and wrap it in the thing that is kind of the zeitgeist in order to give it narrative legitimacy or some cut through. Yeah. And I'm saddened every time I see games using that, because I think the point is we don't have to do that. Right. There's real demand out there. People want to trade this stuff. Let's just give them ownership and make a real value proposition.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like fundamentally people play games because it's a distraction from the real world. It's just fun. But then there's nothing wrong with I guess what you're saying is there's nothing wrong with the financialization of and layering on incentives. People criticize that as saying it's not sustainable. The in-game economy is not, here are these kind of criticisms to play to earn. I would say play and earn is the more viable model. But what is your perspective on that as a whole? Like, these economies, you talked about that being a pretty big criteria as you evaluate a game. Like, what are some parameters or things that you say, hey, this can actually work?
So first off, the fundamental difference between sustainable and non-sustainable, I guess, game is the reason you play the game to earn money, in which case it's kind of zero sum based on your financial return profile, or is it because you like playing the game? And there can be as much financialization as you like within that. You can have games where they're fun and a whale wants to spend $10 million because now they have the ability to sell later. And that's totally fine. That's just an expansion of the value proposition. as long as there's some fundamental reason you'd play that experience, in my opinion. But I have nothing against super, financialized games. I think the vast majority of revenue is driven by whales anyway. We're now delivering them far more value because now the whale who spends $1 million in Game of War is in, oh, great, I have nothing to show for this. Mm-hmm. They can build an ecosystem. They can own part of land and guilds and be a person who's meaningful in that ecosystem. I think that's awesome. The second thing, though, on economic sustainability, this is the reason why we do Immutable Studios. This is why we publish things like Guild of Guardians, so that we actually have people in the front line understanding what it takes to build a sustainable economy. And so we have a lot of thoughts here. We'll be rolling them out with Guild of Guardians and testing out our latest paradigm. But the first hit will be the model that everyone copies. You saw that with Axie and people copied it and ultimately it was unsustainable. Nothing against Axie, great game. But that's how gaming evolves, right? Is you have a hit and then people copy that sort of hit. We saw this with Farmville, with Mafia Wars. Mafia Wars has been reskinned into 20 different games, all leveraging, the social and graph of Facebook. We want to make sure when there's the first hits, they're copying fundamentally sustainable economies.
Yeah. I mean, look, we should probably talk about what is wrong or what are the challenges of traditional game studios. Because, there's a lot of, you look at Zynga as a company and look, Mark Pincus has gotten quite interested in Web3, I think, and people should go out and check out he has great kind of threads around this.
Yeah.
But, you have the retention problem, the half-life of a game, whether it's fast casual or a AAA game is pretty tough. You have to, it's sort of this treadmill that you're on, a hamster wheel that you have to put out more and more hits.
Yeah. And it's a real race to the bottom, right? So my favorite stat is in China, we've shifted from, hey, you pay for the ability to play a game to you pay for items inside of games to now you have literally clone games in China. They have a Clash Royale or Clash of Clans clone and they advertise themselves as our loot boxes are half the price of our competitors. So it's a complete race to the bottom, right? It's completely, okay, who can get cheaper acquisition, who can, sell this value proposition for less. Yeah.
All right, everyone. So we talk a lot about the institutions coming into crypto on Empire. Santi and I are both headed out to London, March 18th to 20th for Blockworks' 8th ever Digital Asset Summit, DAS. This is an institutional buttoned up conference that we've hosted since 2019. I like to joke that it is probably the last remaining kind of suit and tie event in crypto. People are still wearing suit and tie. It's pretty funny, but you'll actually hear from a lot of the largest institutions in the world coming from Standard Charter, FIS, JP Morgan, Framework folks coming out, Wintermute, Van Eck, Goldman Sachs. There are a couple big themes of this conference. 1, Bitcoin catalysts, the halving and the spot ETF. 2, a view from the buy side. 3, RWA's tokenization and stablecoins. 4, global regulatory frameworks. 5, institutional infrastructure, including banking and payments. And 6, the macro case for crypto. If you have anything to do with the institutional side of crypto, you have to be there. Santi and I got your back. We hooked you up with a 20% off code. It is Empire20. There is a little competition running internally at Blockworks to see who can drive the most number of tickets. So help Santi and I out. Register with our code and you get 20% off. That is Empire20.
You and I both invest, you from studios. Personally, gaming is probably the top category or the second where I've invested into so many teams.
Yeah.
And I think what most people don't appreciate is you have really talented builders from Candy Crushes of the world, from all these great studios saying, there's something here, there's something interested in crypto.
Yeah.
The retention, the NFT component, layering elements of Web3 that can actually solve some of these problems and challenges of gaming, right? Build more engagement and whatnot. I guess could you give us some perspective? Because I think people don't really appreciate. I think games take a long time to build.
Yep.
You have fast casual, I guess, but even that, these things take time to build. And I think we're just going to start seeing these. Illusion's already out.
Yeah.
But we're going to see what's the next year or the next 18 months look like in terms of.
So I think 40 to 50% of the games building on Immutable today will be live in 2024. So it's going to be a big year. That's when we start to see you hitting the 3-year development point for most of the games. And that's typically kind of the lower bar of time it takes required to build a good game. There will be delays, but that's why we have 200 of them, right? So that across the portfolio, you're having this, cohort of games going live that we can help support. I think even the micro gaming bull run we've seen in the last couple of months will accelerate things. People will try and get to market faster. They'll try and ship tokens faster. And the most interesting thing to me is when you look at the largest game, I think you're totally right? Which is the smartest people in game design today are saying, hey, there might actually be something here. Not saying they're going and saying, let's shift Activision Blizzard overnight. There's no reason for them to. Like, this is innovator's dilemma, right? But you have in Korea, 5 of the 10 largest public gaming companies there actively building very serious efforts, 8 or 9 figures of budget into Web3. You have Migaloo, which is Krafton's Web3 competitor to Roblox with hundreds of people. You have Nexon building MapleStory, their core IP, with the Web3 variant. We've mapped the 61 largest gaming companies in the world by market capitalization. 30 of them have active full-time teams dedicated to Web3 gaming, exploring it, building a game, building several games. Only 1 out of the 61 said we will never do this. So it's clearly going to happen. Like, there are clearly going to be hits out of the 15 billion US dollars that's now been invested.
What do these studios look like in 2 or 3, 5 years in a version of this world where gaming's a huge hit in Web3? How do they take their existing portfolio and maybe wrap NFTs around it? Or is it like you talk about innovator's dilemma? Like, how do you see that transition? Is it a graceful one? Can they manage it? Or you're more bullish on new studios like crypto native studios?
I think, that's a good question. I'll get to that end question. I think we're going to see mega hits, right? So there's going to be a ton of failures, but the biggest games are going to dwarf the volumes and revenue if Web2 hits even. And that will make people take notice and say, well, hey, if this game is delivering this much, and it actually doesn't matter whether the revenue is to them or to the community. It's just about how much economic opportunity is here. And how can he's an interesting one.
And by the way, it could happen in months' time because, people forget, but gamings are the most fast, revenue scaling businesses ever. Just go from 0 to 100 million in a month.
And they never need to fundraise again because they're profitable, right? Unless they have ambitions to build broader studios and they need to de-risk. But
not if you have secondary royalties on all this stuff.
Precisely. And one of the things I'm super bullish on is games' biggest cost is Google or Facebook running ads, getting people to click in and play their games. They spend billions and billions of dollars of it. Gabe Layden from Machine Zone was famously the biggest performance marketing spender on games of all time. And he was running Super Bowl ads for hundreds of millions of dollars. And what we have the opportunity to do is completely replace that spend with viral sharing of games, because you give players value that causes them to stick around longer, share it with their friends, and even to take a chunk of your future value of that game, tokenize it, and then give that token away.
Yeah. There's this idea in gaming, before crypto, I was also investing in games, this viral coefficient, and the virality of hey, you play a game, you tell your friends, and how does that propagate? I think we've seen time and time again in crypto that's super powerful, and you can embed interesting referral programs on chain. You can codify a lot of this stuff, that it's not a Ponzi if it's a real product. It's sort of
you're bringing real demand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think it's
just affiliate marketing.
It's just a more efficient way, whether instead of paying Google billions of dollars to acquire customers, your customer acquisition cost can be arguably lower, more efficient, more trackable. And you own a more direct relationship with the user. Yeah. And to build a better community because, it's a win-win. The users also benefit from this economy. And
it's basically removing ad brokers as a middleman and instead replacing it with directly sharing that value with your audience in exchange for them becoming your early evangelists. And I think that's awesome. I think that's a strictly superior model.
Yeah. What have been kind of the challenges that you foresee in terms of if 200, 1,000 games launch, is there an upper bound? And have you guys done the math around, hey, we can credibly support X amount of users, load balancing, this,
totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's obviously an upper limit to what we can support on just Immutable ZKVM. That upper limit is very high. It's the highest of any, L2. It's Fluidium implementation, so it's optimized for gaming scaling in particular. We've done a lot of optimization around, NFT design, etc. But and we'll be supporting ERC 1155, which people will be excited to hear, which we don't have on our app-specific rollup. But the key thing is horizontal scaling. So the ability for anyone to have their own Immutable app chain, for you to have cross roll-up liquidity across hundreds or indeed thousands one day of these app chains. And that means you can, with assets on chain A, purchase a listing on chain B with our global order book across any marketplace using any wallet, using any denomination of that listing on any immutable supported rollup. And I think that's where we have this engine that's sort of aggregating liquidity and providing the best prices to anyone who wants to trade.
So if you're a game, the VI will they may deploy an immutable, they get really big, they'll arguably likely transition to their own app chain.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think like a giant scale game. Most games won't need this. Exactly.
And kind of have more sovereignty.
Say the World of Warcraft or like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can control more parameters by having their own chain or like their app.
Precisely. Yeah. They could have their own native gas currency. And I think the other cool thing is this gives a really strong sovereign option to people who want to build their own platforms or chains for infrastructure as well.
Yeah. How does the global liquidity, I mean, that's pretty novel. The connectivity I'm thinking of IBC or is it like, how does it actually work? So, you have to go too technical about
it. There's a few things that give us an edge here. The main thing it comes down to is vertical integration of the platform. So because we own and build both the rollup layer and the wallet layer and the order book layer, we can create seamless experiences that other people can't. So a good example is, imagine I won't cite this specific example, but on another super chain or app chain, you're trying to buy an asset on chain B from funds on chain A. You have to bridge those funds across. As soon as you signal, and first off, that has obviously finality times to the blocker. So unless you're using ZK proofs, it's going to be a problem. Second off, you have to, as soon as you signal to MEV, you're likely to be front run. And so you have this problem of how do you have liquidity across different rollups? And third, you have the weakest link problem, which is if you have different security models for each of your proofs, your entire ecosystem is only as secure as your weakest link. We solve all three of these. And the way we solve them is the global order book means we can actually lock down bids on asset on chain B as soon as you indicate a bid on chain A. And because we have the passport, the user experience, we can make that completely invisible in an atomic transaction to the end user. And because we're using the same security models, ZK rollups on everything, it's shared security. So I think that's kind of how we think about things from an architecture perspective.
That's super interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and Violator, because of the global order book, you can not only do it in different rollups. One person can be, say, selling in an in-game marketplace, and the other person can be, say, on Sphere Marketplace or GameStop or Rarible or Magic Eden. And that means you're unifying liquidity not just across rollups, but across any trade venue.
Yeah. I want to hear your thoughts on, I know you're a gamer. What are some of the types of games that you're most excited about? Maybe we can go through different categories.
We obviously a lot of TCGs, and I think that's a native mimetic fit for Web3. I think there's a very strong, clear value proposition there. I'm very excited for games that are mobile targeting Asia. I think they're going to be huge, and they're probably where the next 10 million users are going to come from. We have a ton of games building in Asia right now. Honestly, even I was just in Hong Kong last week, even out of mainland China. Obviously, crypto is not legal there, but you have people like building games and then not seeking to publish them locally. They just want to do global publishing with Web3, and they're kind of in, cottage industries and building in clandestine ways. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but they're not being overt about it. Right. And there's literally hundreds of these games over there. So I think it's certainly going to be Asia, which will be first across the post. Other things I'm excited about, I think things leveraging UGC with Web3 incentives. Yeah. Super excited about shooters targeting like the CSGO strategy. I mean, if you have a look at the reactions, say to some of the say Midnight Society or Dead Drop, it's a mainstream audience watching that, and they're pretty supportive of that because they're used to paying for items in CSGO. They understand the value that they're getting. And so I think that's a really big validating step for me. There's no pushback there. And this is the most hardcore gamers you have in a Western audience because they natively experience this value in CSGO and because they've gotten screwed over before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's almost like if you talk to Vitalik and so many other people that have been interested in crypto, it's because of this trading skins problem.
Vitalik famously said the damage component of his World of Warcraft spell being removed, which I think may have been facetious, but it is kind of a great evidence point.
Yeah. So look, I mean, obviously, no surprise. I'm really excited about Game A. I think next year, and the visibility that I have, you have, it's looking like there's going to be really fun games that we can play. and I'm really excited about it. I guess for a skeptic listening, like, why won't this work? Like if you, in 2 years time, we sit down again and we say, God, we're all very excited and gung ho as here with what we're seeing and the type of, builders that we're seeing. What's like the bear case?
I think maybe reg, but it seems like a low,
That's like existential for all of crypto.
Yeah, exactly. Realistically, I can't see there not being hits. It's not like it could, because there's no leap required to say you should be able to sell and off-ramp your value from Counter-Strike Ghost skins. There's already demand there, and demand for a long tail of games, all with secondary market economies, just on great databases and great marketplaces. So, this thing is going to take off. I think the bear case is like, it doesn't replace all of gaming, right? It's not every single multiplayer game with an economy is this. And that may take time. But at this point, there's clearly going to be hits. And it's about making sure that those are decentralized, those are done with frictionless user experience. Yeah.
I mean, look, people constantly criticize, especially during bear markets, like there's no product market fit, there's no value. What's the point of all this? It's just a casino.
Yeah.
For me, the way I think about gaming very simplistically is like NFTs are a very, like, it's touching a nerve. Like collecting is such a powerful sport. It's social. People love collecting this stuff. Like basically created the ability to have digital provable scarcity.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily replace, it just creates an entire economy, and it fits so nicely with games.
Yep.
And so, I mean, again, we're all super biased, but for me, that was the big aha moment. Of course, you put aside the broken economics and whatever of things that were DeFi with a veneer of gaming, but true fun games will work, I think.
Totally agree. And I think you said it bang on the head, right? NFTs are just taking the value proposition of Bitcoin, which is digital custodial ownership of goods with scarcity, and applying it to any form of value. And we just think the first place that's going to happen is the place where people are already spending hundreds of billions of dollars and getting zilch for it. Right.
Yeah. Let's transition a bit into talking about what's next for Immutable, in terms of collaborations, partnerships, your go-to-market. Like, how do you really win this category? There's, again, hundreds of L2s. You're very focused. How do you win the gaming category?
Yeah. I think we're close to being there at this point. Without tooting our own horn, we've I think built considerable progress over the last year. End of last year, we had roughly 35% of all games. Polygon had the other 35% with a 2-horse race. We were competing in market. We were spending tons on grants, hiring BDs. We negotiated, for 6 months, I think one of the most meaningful partnerships that's happened in Web3. And that was taking Immutable's platform, combining it with the open source ZK technology that Polygon's been developing, and we don't want to build scaling infrastructure. It's not our business. And providing a joint solution to gamers that would massively simplify their choices when they were choosing, hey, how do we build on Web3? It shouldn't have to be, here's your scaling infrastructure, here's your platform, here's your wallet. It should just be, I'm just going to use Immutable, right? And you have everything be same defaults. And that's been an incredible partnership. And shout out to the Polygon team. It was exceptional. But
this came about through the Hermes acquisition, Jordy.
Exactly. Yeah. So they bought those 3 ZK teams back 2 years ago now. And I think what has been one of the most successful examples of M&A in the space. And now have including market leading ZK technology. And most importantly, we were able to unify our go-to-market efforts and have the Immutable platform plus Polygon basically had this incredibly strong joint value proposition. Since then, we've taken 100 well-funded games to over 220, and thousands more apply in self-service, building with our APIs where you don't even need to build smart contracts. Our win rate has jumped from 35 to close to 70%. That means the percentage of deals we win when we're competing against other blockchains. So that's been phenomenal. I've been really thrilled with the progress of that. And the best thing has been, we've had games come to us and say, well, we were deciding between Immutable and Polygon, all the stress, and now it's just simple. We can get to market faster. And then I think we have the second form of those, which is the Merit Circle partnership, which if you're watching this has just gone live. We're
recording this on Tuesday.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but it's going live.
Yeah. On Thursday or Wednesday, US. And that is another example of us taking the largest Web3 gaming DAO in the world, who has $100 million non-native treasury, a much bigger native treasury, has this incredible focus on how do they invest in, publish, build infrastructure for games. And we say, well, why are we've been competing in market for the last year. we can simplify the choice for developers, we can massively improve our own efforts, and we can create a much better end product. So I'm really, really excited to be working with the Merit Circle, Beam, Sphere Marketplace on Immutable CKAVM. They're going to be using Passport, Global Order Book, and more importantly, we're just sort of committed to developing this product and this partnership to make it as useful as possible to game developers.
So for people that might not be even aware of what Merit Circle is, can you just maybe dig a little bit deeper into the role that they play in the gaming ecosystem?
The largest Web3 gaming DAO in the world, $100 million non-native treasury in cash, and a much larger native treasury. And their focus is building, a suite of products in an ecosystem to help game developers succeed and deliver a seamless user experience. And again, the thesis was very similar, which is that they're currently building on Avalanche, and they're going to be, expanding and putting a lot of efforts on Immutable ZKVM. And they now don't have to, compete for these deals. We can work together on the games, building on Immutable, which is the lion's share of games in the industry. We can, they massively reduce their costs and can build a much more successful business. And together, I think we just have a much stronger value proposition to game developers. So, your question was, how do we build more market share, create Immutable as the default platform? I think it's exactly this, which is by supporting and empowering people to build incredible businesses, incredible infrastructure with the suite of games building on Immutable today. We've put in the hard work to kind of onboard all of these people. Now they can go and, build with businesses at different layers of the stack. So I think that's the thing we're going to be really focused on over the next year. Yeah.
So maybe for, if you're a builder, I guess, you built games in the past for Web2. Like, how's that experience today? Like, what are the challenges that you need to overcome? You talk about tooling, you talk about Merit Circle, you guys make it easier for them. But how smooth or difficult is that transition? Like, you have to learn Solidity, you have to, understand certain things. Like, what are those things, right? I'm sure folks, for anyone out there that is listening saying, hey, I want to build a Web3 game. Like, what does that actually mean?
So my favorite thing and what we started from day one is we always thought it was crazy to require people to have to learn smart contracts to build a Web3 game. We certainly have that. And if you build an Immutable ZKVM, you can copy any default contracts from Ethereum L1, use it, build your own DeFi. But we imagine as this goes mainstream, the vast majority of people will want to build just using APIs like Stripe. You don't have to learn a proprietary language to build with Stripe. It's very, very simple interface. In the same way, we've now integrated SDKs into Unity, into all latest versions of Unreal Engine, which are used in production today.
This is, for context, the most popular probably engine, right?
Precisely, the two most popular. And our thesis is just make this ridiculously simple. People shouldn't have to hire PhD economists, smart contract experts, Solidity architecture engineers. They shouldn't have to hire auditors. This stuff should be, boilerplate, audited, tested, and they should just work with a simple set of APIs to create a real economy. That's what we've built today. I'm very proud of that. A good chunk of the people building today still build, directly with smart contracts, more advanced developers. Most of the developers who are sort of, ETH native or Web3 native today, but that's kind of our long-term view. If you're building a marketplace, it's incredibly simple.
So it sounds like it's gone super easy. You don't have to hire a Solidity engineer. You could just focus on building a beautiful, great product, feature parity or better than a Web2 game.
Yep.
And then you guys help with all the other stuff.
Yeah. So join hub.immutable.com. You can sign up with Passport. You can build incredibly easily if you're a game dev listening to this, and we'll automatically prioritize your game for access to grants and our BD team and the ecosystem.
So just to recap, and I think this is a good place to end it, the 5, or you said, I think 4 or 5, the most important criteria as you evaluate a game are, again?
So the 5 are.
The 5 are, yeah.
Yeah, it's team quality, Web3 game design, quality of the game that we're testing, Web3 game design and game design combined, and time to market. So we want games that are coming out faster to have more shots at hits in 2024.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Robbie, I'm super excited. Obviously, your journey, we've known each other for such a long time. We actually met in person, not too long ago, but we've known each other for a long time in the digital world. So amazing what you guys are doing. I think
pleasure, Santiago.
One of those things that is being overlooked, I think, and we talk about narratives and empire a lot. And I think 2024 is going to be a fantastic year and a fun one for people to actually use products and using crypto elements. So
yeah, we're quietly confident. I think very excited about what it'll bring.
I love that, quietly confident.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, Robbie.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah. Take care.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's episode. Really hope you enjoyed it. We wanted to take a second to just remind you about our upcoming Digital Asset Summit in London, March 18th to 20th. Santi and I got your back. Seats are limited, and we hooked you up with a 20% off discount code. It is Empire20. If you heard it earlier in the podcast, there's a little competition running at Blockworks to see who can drive the most number of tickets. So when you register for the Digital Asset Summit, make sure you use our code Empire20. See you in London.